the king who murdered 10 million people, and history let him walk free, Leopold II and the Congo. Everyone knows the names of history's great monsters. We teach their crimes in schools. We build museums so the world never forgets. But there is one man responsible for the deaths of an estimated 10 million people, a death toll on the scale of the worst atrocities ever recorded. And most people have never heard his name. He never fired a gun. He never set foot in the country he destroyed. He did it all from a palace in Europe, wearing a crown, smiling for photographs, and being praised across the world as a humanitarian. This is the story of King Leopold II of Belgium, and how he got away with it. Chapter 1. The Respectable Monster. In the late 1800s, Leopold II was the king of one of the smallest countries in Europe. Belgium was tiny, peaceful, and barely a generation old. Its constitution gave the king almost no real power at home, and Leopold hated that. He was a tall, imposing man with a famous fan-shaped beard, fluent in several languages, obsessed with money and prestige. While other European powers were carving up the globe and growing rich, Leopold sat on a throne with no empire to rule. He once complained that Belgium was too small for him. He wanted a colony. He wanted what France and Britain had, and he became absolutely fixated on getting one. Here's the chilling part. Leopold did not present himself as a conqueror. He understood something most tyrants never grasp, that the easiest way to commit a great crime is to dress it up as a great kindness. Chapter 2. The Greatest Con in History. Leopold's eyes fell on Central Africa, specifically the vast, resource-rich basin of the Congo River, a territory roughly 76 times the size of Belgium itself. But he couldn't just take it. The other European powers were watching, and they would never allow a small country to grab such an enormous prize. So Leopold built a lie so convincing that the entire world fell for it. He founded an organization with a noble-sounding name, dedicated to science, exploration, and ending the Arab slave trade in Africa. He hired the famous explorer Henry Morton Stanley to travel up the Congo River and sign treaties with hundreds of local chiefs who could not read the documents and had no idea they were signing away their land. Then Leopold went to work on the diplomats. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where European powers met to divide Africa among themselves, Leopold presented himself as a selfless philanthropist who only wanted to bring Christianity, free trade, and civilization to the Congo. The great powers, wary of giving the territory to a rival, happily handed it to the harmless little king instead. And so something unprecedented happened. The Congo Free State was not made a colony of Belgium. It became the personal private property of one man. Leopold now privately owned a piece of Africa larger than Western Europe, and answered to absolutely no one. Chapter 3. Red Rubber. For a few years the lie held, and then the world changed in a way that turned Leopold's giant possession into a money machine and a death camp. The invention of the inflatable rubber tire created an explosive global demand for rubber, and the Congo's rainforests were full of wild rubber vines. Suddenly, Leopold's private kingdom could make him one of the richest men on earth. All he needed was for the rubber to be harvested, and he did not intend to pay for it. A brutal system was built across the entire territory. Each village was given an impossible quota of rubber to deliver. To enforce it, Leopold created a private army called the Force Publique, local soldiers commanded by European officers. When a village failed to meet its quota, the punishment was systematic and merciless. Soldiers took women and children hostage, locking them in stockades to starve until the men brought in enough rubber. Villages that resisted were burned. People were whipped with the shikot, a whip of dried hippopotamus hide that could kill. And then came the practice the Congo would become infamous for. Chapter 4. the baskets of hands. To make sure soldiers did not waste their expensive ammunition on hunting, officers demanded proof that every bullet had been used to kill a rebel. The proof they demanded was a human hand. For every cartridge fired, a soldier had to bring back a severed right hand. Soon hands became a currency of terror. Baskets full of smoked human hands were presented to officers as receipts. And when soldiers missed their target or used bullets for hunting, they would cut the hands off living people, including children, to make up the count. The numbers are almost impossible to absorb. Over roughly 2 decades, demographers estimate that the population of the Congo fell by around 10 million people, through murder, starvation, exhaustion, disease, and a collapsing birth rate as families were torn apart. The exact figure is still debated by historians, but even the most cautious estimates describe one of the deadliest episodes in human history. And the man responsible was, at that very moment, being celebrated in Europe as a kind and generous king. Chapter 5. The men who refused to look away for years. Almost no one in Europe questioned the story. Leopold controlled the information, funded friendly newspapers, and silenced critics. But the truth has a way of leaking out. It began with a shipping clerk named Edmund Dean Morrill, who noticed something strange in the company ledgers. Ships returning from the Congo were packed with rubber and ivory worth fortunes. But the ships going out carried mostly guns, chains, and ammunition. There was no trade. Nothing was being paid for the rubber. Morrill realized this could only mean one thing. The wealth was being extracted by force. He quit his job and devoted his life to exposing it. He was joined by Roger Casement, a British diplomat who traveled deep into the Congo and documented the atrocities in a devastating official report. Years earlier, an African-American historian named George Washington Williams had already written an open letter accusing Leopold's regime of crimes against humanity, one of the first times that phrase was ever used. Together, these voices built the first great international human rights movement of the modern age. The pressure became impossible to ignore. In 1908, the Belgian government was forced to strip the Congo away from Leopold and take control of it themselves. Chapter 6. How he walked free. Here is the part that should make all of us uncomfortable. Leopold II was never punished, not arrested, not tried, not even truly disgraced in his own lifetime. When he was finally forced to surrender the Congo, he reportedly ordered the territory's archives burned, destroying the paper trail of what had been done, so the world could never fully account for it. The furnaces are said to have burned for days. He died in 1909, one of the wealthiest men in Europe. He used his blood-soaked fortune to build grand palaces, monuments, parks, and arches across Belgium, many of which still stand and are admired by tourists today, most of whom have no idea what paid for them. For a long time, he was remembered in Belgium not as a mass murderer, but as the Builder King. Why did history let him walk free? Partly because the victims were African and far away, and the world of the time simply valued their lives less. Partly because Leopold destroyed the evidence. And partly because the story does not fit neatly into the way nations like to remember themselves. It is far more comfortable to admire the arches than to ask about the hands. Only in recent years have statues of Leopold begun to come down, and his name begun to carry the weight it always should have. But for over a century, one of the greatest killers in human history was hiding in plain sight, behind a crown, behind a beard, behind the word humanitarian. He murdered millions, and history let him walk free.